But first, uncertainty is swirling for many Venezuelans in Chicago. Before he left office, President Biden extended temporary protected status, or TPS, for Venezuelans. But just a few weeks later, the Department of Homeland Security rescinded it under President Trump. So people who thought they had a work permit and protection from deportation until this September, well, they'll see that go away as early as next month. WBEZ criminal justice reporter Chip Mitchell and WBEZ immigration reporter Adriana Cardona-Maguigad have been talking to local TPS holders about what they plan to do next. And they both join me in studio now. Hey, Adriana. Hey, Chip.
Morning, hey, Sasha.
So, Adriana, give us the backstory here. What's temporary protected status exactly?
Yeah, so it's also known as TPS. So it's a program that's established for eligible foreign-born individuals who are unable to return to their homeland because of unsafe conditions and extreme circumstances, and that includes extreme violence, extreme poverty. This program has long been used as a humanitarian solution for immigrants who are unable to, again, return home safely. Mm-hmm. And if you are a TPS holder, that means that you cannot be detained by immigration or deported, and you're eligible to work in the U.S. You're authorized to work, and you're also allowed to travel.
Right.
And so countries like Venezuela, El Salvador, Haiti, they have been getting TPS designations in recent years.
And Chip, can you paint the picture for us about what this means for Venezuelans exactly? Adriana mentioned their extreme poverty, violence, political turmoil. Why were they fleeing their country?
Yeah, for many years, for more than a decade, in really big numbers until just recently, something like 8 or 9 million Venezuelans left their country. So we're talking about a quarter of the population. Mm-hmm. Political instability and persecution under the authoritarian leader Nicolas Maduro. He's widely accused of stealing the most recent election last summer, and then an economic collapse, hyperinflation. We're talking about not like 8 or 10% inflation. We're talking about 100% inflation, and then 1,000%, making the currency's
right.
basically worthless. And so that brought it from in the mid 2000 teens, that brought it from political opponents and professionals to just like all kinds of working class people flowing out of Venezuela in big numbers.
And so this, of course, Adriana, caught the attention of President Biden. He granted TPS for Venezuelans back in 2021. Tell us what was happening at the time and then why he granted the extension last year.
Well, even before that, many Venezuelans had been pushing to have a TPS designation, given the country's political and economic situation. So as this mass exodus kept happening, not only on its way to the United States, it had already been happening for years to countries like Colombia and different parts of South America. At the same time, more and more Venezuelans are heading to the United States. The country's not doing any better. Yeah. There was a lot of pressure, and they faced resistance during the Trump administration. So when Biden finally, took office, that designation happened for Venezuelans, and it got extended also because as you have more and more people crossing, asking for asylum in the United States, it all takes a process. There's just so much to it. I can go on and on, but it's a way to create a designation for people who face danger back in their country, but they allows them to work here and just kind of create a life in the moment.
And as you both said, stability, right? Stability is what they're looking for. How many Venezuelans are here in Chicago and Illinois?
It's hard to tell. I will tell you some of the latest census from the city would say that they received estimates of more than 50,000 migrants arriving. How many were from Venezuelans? The majority were from Venezuela. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that they've stayed in Chicago. A lot of people have tried Chicago and also, went to Indiana or Wisconsin or other countries. But we still have a large Venezuelan community here in Chicago.
So this is under threat. TPS is now ending for Venezuelans. When?
So there are 2 designations that I'm aware of, but people should still contact their, legal clinics and other immigration attorneys. But for people who got the TPS under designation in 2023, the TPS is set to expire in April. for those who got
As in next month.
as of next month.
Okay.
And those who got the TPS in 2021, they have until September. But make sure you check your dates. And it's unfortunate because if, you know, a lot of people have like the asylum and then they apply for TPS, the TPS shields them from deportation. When you have a process as asylum applicant, it doesn't mean that you have a status. It means you're in a process. It doesn't really shield you from deportation. Like it's a very sensitive situation in which you're in. And even though you may have, you may be able to get a work permit just as an asylum applicant, it doesn't really mean that you have kind of like a status that you're, you know, that you can establish,
right.
you know, like your legal status here. So it gets really complicated without this.
Yeah, and then a lot of people with TPS don't have asylum applications in, so their only status at all is this temporary protected status, and when that's gone, they become just, you know, undocumented.
Yeah.
Like millions of Mexicans and Central Americans and Asians and Africans that are in this country already undocumented, living for years. That will be the status of hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans in this country.
Let's dive into the pieces that you both are reporting for WBEZ, which we'll see up online later this afternoon. Chip, starting with you, you talked with a Venezuelan restaurant owner in Hermosa. I loved just hearing the sneak peek of your piece where you were fascinated as you shadowed him by the tallest hamburger ever that he was preparing at the time. Let's listen.
This burger is in a Venezuelan style. We put lettuce, tomato, smoked pork chop, and chicken breast, bacon, ham, cheese, potato sticks, and our sauces. And that's gonna be my dinner. Yes, my dinner, exactly.
What should we know about Kareem?
Well, he can eat a big hamburger. That's the first
That's
thing.
one.
He and his wife, Maria, they came from Venezuela in 2014. They were just 20 and 18 years old. They were college students. They overstayed tourist visas. They started in Miami. They moved to Chicago a couple years later. They founded their first restaurant in Chicago's Hermosa neighborhood. It's called Rica Arepa. Since then, they've opened 2 more locations. So they've got a little chain going here. He and his wife, they now employ 24 people, Sasha, at the restaurants. They got TPS in 2021. That's the temporary protected status that we're talking about. It helped them get financing. Their restaurants were successful, so they had some capital that they were amassing. They bought a house for their family. It's in Austin. And they have 7 rental properties now. So they're providing homes on the north side for 12 working class families, mostly immigrants.
So they're landlords, employing dozens of people, as you mentioned. In your piece, you also talk with Ana Gil Garcia, who's founder of Illinois Venezuelan Alliance. She talked even more about Kareem and his family, their role in the community. So this sounds like it's not just something that's going to impact them. There are ripple effects here if they leave.
For sure.
So you rode around with him in his truck, picking up items, I guess, for the restaurant. I want to play a little bit more of Kareem describing how he's feeling right now about the future.
They know me. They know where I live. They know all my businesses, all my purpose. They know everything about me. So they could just take me out. I don't think anyone deserves to be treated like that. Like we're criminals or anything like that, because we're not. We're just trying to build a life here. I feel like this is my country now. This is my home now.
Wow. So he's being faced with the reality of what's to come. And I'd love to hear more about his plans then. Is he thinking about what to do next when TPS ends?
Well, yeah, I wasn't expecting that moment, frankly, Sasha. I've done a lot of sad stories lately, and I was not looking to tell a sad story. But he's driving his truck, and he just basically broke down right away. So he's projecting this strong images for his employees and his tenants and his family, and he just lost it as soon as he started talking about it. So they're planning they want to keep the 3 restaurants and their 7 rental properties going. It's not easy if they lose their TPS, because that means they're not going to have any worker authorization, any social security number. So like banking will be really hard again. It'll be a lot harder to get any sort of financing because of a lot of Venezuelans are really they're staying home right now because they're afraid to go out. Their business is down, so their credit cards are nearly maxed out. But on the other hand, they own a house now. They've got 2 kids. They've got a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old. The 5-year-old's in kindergarten in a Chicago public school that they really like. They have a lot of relatives in this country with legal status. So far, they haven't been able to figure out a way for them to get legal status. So all they have right now is TPS, and when they lose it, they're just undocumented.
Wow. If you're just tuning in, this is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. The Department of Homeland Security has rescinded former President Biden's extension of temporary protected status for Venezuelans. And so we're talking about the local impact for Venezuelans here in the Chicago area with Chip Mitchell, who's a WBEZ criminal justice reporter, and Adriana Cardona-Maguigad, who's a WBEZ immigration reporter. Now, your piece is very interesting, Adriana, in that you talked with a couple who, within their own household, they have very different approaches to what should happen next when protections end. I want to play a little bit of what we'll hear from the husband who wants one thing and the wife who wants another. Now, this will be in Spanish, and I'll have you sort of translate on the back end for us.
Yo siempre he dicho que si Dios me está bota aquí, es porque aquí me voy a quedar. Y yo confío mucho en Dios.
Yo no pienso igual que ella. Mira, Caro, el principal problema es que...
So they disagree. Talk us through what's happening there.
Yeah, so basically, back in Venezuela, he was a police officer. She did she had her own business, did pretty good. But now, after they left about, 10 years ago, and they've now in the United States, they are really, she's really seeing a future for themselves. They both work at a meat packing, a food processing company. He has a job. She has a job. They were able to bring in their kids. They have a grandson here. And so he is still starting to feel that tension of, being suddenly deported, mainly because his experience crossing the border and staying at a detention facility, the former police officer wearing an orange jumpsuit, wearing handcuffs, staying there for weeks. And he just feels like it was the worst experience of his life. And he doesn't want to be arrested and detained without having a plan, without figuring out what to do with their assets, their savings. And he doesn't want to be taken by surprise and then be just kind of like dropped in some other country, in Mexico or Costa Rica.
So he's saying, let's be realistic here. We're probably going to have to go. Let's figure out a plan. And she's saying, no, I want to stay here.
She was more realistic. They keep arguing about the country's political situation, and they keep going back between this authoritarian regime and when is the country going to get better? He wants to go and help rebuild democracy. She wants to stay here because her sons were harassed by pro-government gangs there. She experienced violence. She remembers the poverty. She remembers when she went from having a full refrigerator to an empty one, to having to stand in line for hours and hours and hours just to buy some food.
Wow. Yeah,
Yes.
So things got really scary for them and their sons, you said, back in Venezuela.
Yes, it got really scary. So for her, it's remember this. And he kept saying, yeah, but I'm already in my 60s. How are we going to just all of a sudden be arrested and deported and not have a plan and have to start over? So it really has the family in a very tense moment and situation.
Oh, yeah, it's straining their marriage, it sounded like.
It seemed like it. I mean, at the same time, it seems like they have been long life hustlers in terms of they've lived in Ecuador, they lived in so many other places. Here is where they found a sense of stability. And as much as they were fighting too, they are hoping that one will convince the other.
Yeah, and faced with that tough question of, do we split up even? Does one of us go back and while one of us tries to, ride it out here in Chicago? Very, very tough for a family to deal with. So, folks, what are you keeping an eye on here? This is ever evolving. You first, Chip.
Well, of the 600,000 roughly people, Venezuelans, that are going to lose their TPS in either April or September under the Trump administration, a certain percentage of them, it's not clear, but a sizable fraction of them have no other status at all. They haven't applied for asylum, and so I'm just wondering where they're going to go. I think Karim and Maria, these restaurant owners, I think they're going to stick it out. But what will the mass of people are we going to see anyone leaving here in the Chicago area? Are they just going to be like, we're done with this? We're going to go back. So that's the main question that I have.
Adriana?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with Chip. That's like the main thing. Are people planning, living on their own, but like going back on their own? But at the same time, I just want to mention one thing. Like I was telling you that too, Chip. Like as I was finishing yesterday's story, and as I'm mixing it and working on it, and thinking about this fear that the couple have in terms of especially him, like the Machado, like he's thinking we are gonna suddenly get deported and just dropped in some country. I got a text message from the mother of this Venezuelan family I knew. She has 5 children. Her husband was here working. They reached out to me from Costa Rica. So this couple's nightmare, the worst nightmare that could be happening, like the worst fear, became a nightmare for this other family of 5.
My.
They were deported.
They were deported. I still have to find many of the details, and I'm working, like as you're saying, like, what am I looking into? We're looking into all these cases now of people who are randomly now getting deported.
Yeah.
The family was dropped in Mexico, and now they're in Costa Rica, on the streets.
Just brings back the realities of the situation.
Yes.
Goodness. Fantastic reporting from Adriana Cardona-Maguigad, WBEZ's immigration reporter, and Chip Mitchell, WBEZ's criminal justice reporter. Their stories, including some great photos, are going up online later this afternoon at WBEZ.org. Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Sasha.